Hey everybody, it's time for Jack Lake Weed Warrior TV, and today we have as a guest our friend Dr. David Lane. Uh, Dr. David is a thought leader and a very knowledgeable person on freshwater lakes and ecosystems. He has one of those things, what are they called again? Is it a PhD? I think he has one of those. He has a PhD. Yeah. And also has a degree in chemical engineering. So, David, I wanted to chat to you today because I'm confused about some things, and that's not unusual for me, but I'd like to clear some things up, and maybe our audience would like it as well. Now, at Jack Lake, we have a couple of different statuses that I just need a little bit more clarity on. Are we actually classed now as a cold lake, Lake Trout Lake? What's the scoop on that?
Yes. And when you mention cold water, all lakes in the summer are about the same temperature.
Oh,
So what's a cold water lake? It's only cold down deep.
okay.
A shallow lake that mixes top to bottom will be the same temperature all the way down. But in our Sharps Bay, the warm water goes down to probably 6 meters or so. And then there's a transition zone called the metalignon. And that goes down to about 15 meters. So we're talking like 45, 48, 50 feet.
Right.
And then you're in the hypolimnion. And it's the hypolimnion that's the cold water. And so in the middle of summer, you go down there and it's going to be 2 to 4 degrees.
Wow.
And in that transition zone, that's where the lake trout like to feed. And so they're probably living at, I don't know, 10 degrees or something like that. But they rarely come into the surface water. So conventional fishermen don't catch them. You got to either have a wire line or an outrigger and go down deep.
Okay.
They in the summer, they're around 12 to 15 meters, I would guess.
Okay.
But Sharps Bay is truly in excellent shape because oxygen levels measured by other independent people are oxygen levels are really quite remarkable, all the way down to the deepest point, which just happens to be 43 meters down.
Wow.
Yeah, 130 feet or so.
That's deep.
Yeah.
So what does it mean for us as cottagers and property owners to have this sort of status? What is it? Is it a good thing for the lake in terms of controlling, the phosphorus and everything else in our lake? What's the advantage or disadvantage to us to have that designation?
We'll back up a step, and I'm going from memory, but it's something like only 5% of the lakes in Ontario contain lake trout.
Oh.
And so it's not common. 5% of the lakes contain lake trout, but what we have is something like 40% of all the lake trout that exist in the world.
In that 5%?
Yes.
Wow.
So this is a very precious commodity.
Yes.
And even more precious is the very few lakes that have native species. There was a big stocking program run a few years ago.
Right.
And so they put fish from the hatchery into many of the lakes, and it kind of spoiled the genetic makeup. I have to tell you something else about nutrition.
Okay.
As we age, and you and I are doing that, and our greatest enemy is dementia.
Yes.
Don't bring it on too soon. Give me a few more years. And one of the greatest preventions is something called omega-3 fatty acids.
Right.
And where do they come from? You say, well, you can buy fish oil from the pharmacy, but you really can't. Almost half of the fish oil is already rancid and contains toxic material.
Wow.
What you need to do, and this is a quote from World Health Organization, for good health, we must eat fish at least twice a week,
Oh, okay.
especially if we're young, especially if we're mothers, and they should eat fish that contain the omega-3, but fairly low in mercury and other contaminants.
Sure.
Us old guys, we really need it too for good brain health.
Okay.
So to put this in a context with lake trout are about 6% compared with most other fish around 2 and 1%.
Oh, okay.
So eating a lake trout is really good for your health.
Yep.
And I remember when I was a boy, my dad would be cooking some lake trout, and he said, you don't have to add any fat to the frying pan because there's so much in the lake trout.
Yeah.
That is healthy fat.
Okay.
So we have a very precious commodity in Jack's Lake. And so what do we need to do to make sure that they're there for our children and grandchildren? Number one, it has to do with phosphorus control. We
Mhm.
talked about that before.
Yep.
We don't want phosphorus coming into the system. Excuse me. And so where's it coming from? As we discussed in previous sessions, it comes from leaky septic tanks, overdevelopment, bringing in fill because you can't grow grass on Canadian shield,
All right.
and worst of all, fertilizer.
Yeah.
So uh, we have a new source of phosphorus that we forgot to talk about before.
Oh, yes.
Canada geese. Yes, Canada geese.
Oh, yeah.
They're big poopers, and
Oh, yeah.
we one of the ways to keep them off your lawn is to let the shoreline vegetation get tall.
Yeah.
They don't like to go through tall grass or shrubs. So anyhow, back to phosphorus.
Yeah.
Sharps Bay is very low still. It's around 8 micrograms per liter. And that's a part per billion. So not much phosphorus.
Right.
If that hits 30, we have floating mats of blue-green. We have what's called eutrophication. We have scum on the water, and weeds are thicker than you could imagine.
Oh.
So we need to make sure, why does this influence lake trout? When the algae sink, they go down to the deep water, and in the absence of light, they decompose by the microbial community, and as a consequence, use up oxygen. So if there's no oxygen down there, the lake trout will die.
Okay.
So
Are we
yeah.
willing, as stewards of the lake, to create a momentum that makes the lake trout extinct? I mean, why should we care?
Why should we care? Because that's what the whole concept of lake capacity is supposed to protect.
Okay.
So how much development can we take before problems occur?
Right.
And that depends on being good stewards of the lake. As I said before, no fertilizer. Have a good septic tank as far away from the lake as you can get.
Right.
And so could it happen at Jack's Lake? And the answer is for sure.
Yeah.
And it has to do with overdevelopment. It has to do with just too many people.
Yeah, which is unfortunate in a way, and yet it seems to be inevitable that the more properties that we have that are being developed, whether they're to code or whatever, you're going to be putting a lot more pressure on the ecosystem, and that's not going to be good for anybody.
So
not new people or old people.
Yeah, the classification of lake capacity, I'm not sure everybody has the same message.
Okay.
Does it mean there can be modest development, or does it mean there can be no development?
Right.
That's where the inconsistency lies, and where the government needs to make a decision.
Okay.
Uh, so yes, is Sharps Bay on the verge of falling off a cliff, so to speak? And the answer is probably not. I think it's in wonderful shape, and that's to the credit of everybody that lives there.
Let's stretch just out a little bit in terms of geography. We have two lakes that I always consider to be kind of our neighbors, and one of them is above us at Chandos, even though we're not connected, and the other one is Stony and Clear, which we are connected to, pretty much through the watershed and the creek, etc. So, does the cold water status that we have, does that affect the people at Chandos at all? Are they in the same category as we are?
I'm not sure if they have the classification, but I know the lake has many deep pockets, and I know they do have trout. So
Okay,
yes, if it's not, it should be. The
sure.
other lake nearby is Anstruther,
And Strother, yeah.
and it's even deeper than Sharps Bay.
Didn't
And
know that. Okay.
excellent oxygen all the way down.
Mhm.
It's a really treasured commodity because it's also connected to the signature park. And it's a huge drainage basin when you think about it.
Okay,
And that water flows over through Catchacoma and Mississauga lakes.
right.
And the dam on Mississauga is the biggest single dam on the Trent Severn Waterway.
Wow, okay.
Yes. And so if you take a drink of water in Peterborough, thank the signature park, because that's where all the good water, or not all the good water, but some of the major sources of water.
It's a good influence on the rest of the water.
That's right. And to make it very simple, when you go through Lakefield and you see the water running under the bridge there,
Yeah.
80% of that water comes from reservoirs in the summertime. And
Okay.
that includes Jack's Lake, Eels Lake, Anstruther Lake, etc.
Wow. So when the government, let's talk about different levels of government. So Peterborough County, what do they have to do with granting or recognizing these classifications? Do they have anything to do with that, or is that simply government of Ontario or the feds?
I believe it's government of Ontario through Ministry of Environment and Climate Change.
Okay. And what about the federales? What about Ottawa? Do they have any influence or say on who's classified as what?
Yeah, I'm perhaps not up to date on that, but usually the federal government only looks at transboundary problems. And as I mentioned before, I used to work for Environment Canada at the National Water Research Institute in Burlington, and did a lot of work on Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and was a science advisor to the International Joint Commission. There was 3 Canadians, 3 Americans, and we tried to deal with problems just as we're discussing, because Lake Erie did have an oxygen depletion problem in the Central Basin. Eastern Basin mixes top to bottom, and so massive blooms of blue-green algae there. But the Eastern Basin, my goodness, what a pristine spot.
Wow.
It's again a very deep basin, something like 65 meters deep, and plenty of oxygen all the way to the bottom. So depth of the lake matters. I think I mentioned that I spend some of my winters in Costa Rica, where I helped them establish a program in environmental toxicology. And because there's volcanoes and mercury kind of go hand in hand. Yes. And so it flows into the ocean, and some of their fish are contaminated. So anyhow, I was given a talk actually in Korea about the work that we were doing in Costa Rica. And a lady from World Health Organization said, would you mind giving a talk to the health ministers of the European Union? So, so I
Mhm.
did it by remote. I didn't travel all the way over, but
All right. Mhm.
that was a good experience.
Yeah.
It was about mercury.
Yeah.
So how do you optimize the exposure to mercury and still get um, the omega-3 fatty acids that are so critically important?
Right.
I'll even send you the PowerPoint that I gave.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
the bottom line is eat small fish because they're the ones that are low in mercury,
Okay.
and the big ones don't have any more omega-3 than the little ones. And one of the best fishes you can eat is sardines.
Oh.
But
Oh.
put the fish off your dock. They too are a wonderful source of healthy material.
Okay, well, I only catch small fish, so I'm not Spencer
Yeah,
Greaves, so I should get some
yeah.
qualified fish into the pan. So
And
good.
a big walleye from Jack's Lake, if you're lucky enough to catch one. Yes,
Mhm.
they taste wonderful. Yes, I love them,
Yeah,
but very high in mercury. And
yeah,
this is all supported by the Guide to Eating Fish for Ontario.
yeah.
So women that are thinking of having a baby should probably avoid big walleye and stick to the perch and sunfish.
Perch, yeah, yeah. Very good. Now let's talk about Stony then, because I know you've been involved with several cottager associations that have actually grouped together. What's that group called? Norco or uh,
Yes,
yeah?
North Kawartha Lakes Association.
Okay. And you just did a presentation to, I guess, was the township, was it?
Yes,
And how did that go? I saw your presentation. It's excellent.
yeah.
What kind of response do you think you got?
It was great. Particularly, I think Mayor Amiot was very supportive.
Mhm.
And North Kawartha itself had produced a very nice little brochure a few years ago. And it articulated many of the problems very well. And so we encouraged them to publish it again. And I did say that we would help out in the redrafting of this because it emphasizes just what we're talking about, the importance of keeping native vegetation on your property. Don't cut down too many trees because you'll have soil erosion. And along the water, don't put in stones and concrete. Keep the natural vegetation along the shore and you won't have any problems.
Right.
The critical part of the entire story is if you have altered the vegetation and you have a hard surface, most of the water, not most, 65% of the water runs off,
Right.
which means the trees get a little short of water.
Mm.
But if you keep natural vegetation, the water then sinks in the soil, the trees are happier, and
Yeah.
the whole ecosystem is healthier.
You cannot beat a happy tree. I'm a firm believer in that. I want happy trees all around. Because
And,
what's the sense of having an unhappy tree?
and do you know there in our makeup, our 23 chromosomes and our so many genes that control everything.
Mhm.
A tree has something like 8 times more than people do.
Mhm. Okay, so David, this you've been on the lake your entire life, and it's been wonderful being able to have that context in what's happening to the lake in general. And shift happens, things change, things grow or shrink, whatever. Is this cold water status? Is this something that the Jack Lake Weed Warrior should be getting behind and making sure that that gets recognized and that gets established? Because I don't know if it's really established or not. It may be somewhere, but I'm not sure that it's public knowledge. What do you think?
Yeah, gee, I think it's wonderful that our lake has this status. Is it well known? I'm not sure.
I don't
And
think.
yes, I was born and raised on Jack's Lake. It certainly, as a young boy, made an impression on me. But then I spent most of my uh, adult life away.
Mhm.
First at university for several years, and then working for Dow Chemical. Then, of course, being part of the Research Institute in Burlington. So when I retired, I came back home. So during that time, like everybody else, I was kind of a weekend visitor to the lake, but wasn't here full time. So having the cold water status is indeed very precious, and clearly linked to the other ones that you mentioned, the at capacity and the trout status.
Yeah.
This is really very important. As I mentioned, only something like 4% of the lakes have lake trout.
Wow, that is an incredible asset for us. I mean, we should be taking care of that. We should be treasuring the fact that 5% of the lakes in the world, or even in Canada, have lake trout, and we're one of the best populated, I guess. So we have to take care of it. Okay.
For sure. Yes,
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, great. So here's a question for you. The municipalities, are they going to be able to, like the townships? You just did a presentation, you got a great reception. You did it on behalf of the North Kawartha folks. Is that what we need to do now, is have these bigger groups take our Jack Lake story out? Or is it going to fall back again to our own cottage association? It seems to me like, is it Norco? I keep getting that confused, but if that organization is leading the way in terms of stewardship of the lakes and the shorelines and water quality, is that our best approach, is to support those people?
Yes, and it's a changing world. I mean, think of yourself. You spent a lifetime in the advertising business, but now you're an environmentalist. And Carolyn Amiot, of course, she's our present mayor, and I've heard her speak on the weed situation down in Big Cedar Lake. I've heard her talking about shoreline protection, and she's doing really well, as I believe most of the rest of the council. However, it's kind of learn as you go. In your career, probably no one prepared you for weeds.
No.
But here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can help bring people along.
Yes, I think that's it. We by leaning on each other, we get the suite of expertise that we need to deal with these very complex problems, which I believe that most of our federal and provincial governments have kind of given up on. And downloaded the responsibility to the municipalities, so they need all the help that they can.
Okay, that's an excellent point. This abdication of responsibility because they are too busy doing other things has to end up somewhere. So if it ends up in a township, then we need people at that level who are going to become proactive instead of just reactive. Remember that when we had politicians and governments that were proactive instead of just, what's in the news cycle today, we better take care of that or deny it. Oh, that's the same thing. Taking care of it and denying it, same thing. Anyway, so we need to have that strong representation. So we are going to do that, I guess, as weed warriors, because no one else is.
You got it.
Okay. Well, we're here. We're here, and we're going to do this. And I'm looking forward to working with you on it, David. And
just to add to what you said, the weeds, in a way, are a function of how much phosphorus is being lost.
Right.
The same is true of protection of lake trout. If we had green scum across our lake by increased growth of algae, oxygen would be depleted in the deep water and all the lake trout would be dead.
Yeah. Well, we cannot let that happen, and it's not that it's not that difficult to understand what the process would be, and somewhere along the line, you've got to say no and stop, and make a stand. Otherwise, the inevitable is going to happen. I mean, hope is not a tactic here. Hope is not a strategy. We need to be on the ground and in the lake, making sure that things happen the way they should as much as we can. Right? We'll never be fully in control.
We'll just add something to that.
Yeah.
There's always people that are ready to step up and help. And certainly we look to Trent University where there is excellent knowledge base.
Yep.
And the people helping out at Chandos Lake rely on information coming from Trent University.
Yep.
And a big thank you to Paul Frost.
Yes.
He's also at Trent University, and all of the North Kawartha lakes are now being monitored. It's not easy and it's not cheap, but I think he has grants to cover the cost and we will benefit. If a lake is showing increased phosphorus over time, he'll tell us about it. And last summer, I had the pleasure of taking his people out on Sharps Bay, and they monitored not only the nutrients, but also collected some zooplankton. They looked at all of the other things that are indicators of good, healthy conditions.
Well, that's excellent. Thanks for doing that. And yeah, Trent is within 60 kilometers or 70 kilometers from our lake. So Chandos is using them to their advantage. We should be as well. And so we're going to follow up on that. Next week, you and I have to have a chat about, going to visit Dave Smith, the MPP in Peterborough, getting on his agenda and working. I mean, I think the whole political game is it's a little bit like pinball. You have to be able to play off each other and get a result. So I don't know if we put enough, or I don't know if we've helped the local MPP learn enough about what's happening or not happening in his own riding with the North Kawartha Lakes. So we'll do that. We'll go have lunch in Peterborough and see our politician friend Dave, and that'll be fun, won't it?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to have fish. I think I need it more than you do. David, thank you again. And next week, I'm going to have somebody on from the Chandos team talking about what they're up to and how they're doing it, because I think we can learn a lot from them. You can learn as much from people's, I'm not going to say mistakes or miscues, as you can from their successes. So I hope to get kind of a integrated look at that. And then from there, maybe we'll be able to get somebody on from the ministry to help us understand what their position is or can be, and we'll go from there, because we're going to keep on top of this, no doubt about it. I'm all fired up. I got to go take my vitamins and then I'll have a nap. Good. David, again, pleasure having you here on Jack Lake Weed Warriors TV. This will be up very soon. And next week, we'll have somebody on from our northerly neighbors from Chandos. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Bye for now.